Hello everybody and welcome to a new episode of our program Languages of the World. Once again we're here for another episode of English, and remember last week we had a guest from Canada, and actually after having an interview with her we found that we still have a lot of questions for her, so we decided to have another episode with her. Let me welcome Professor Daisy Fedyna from Canada. Hello, Professor Daisy, and welcome to our program once again.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you with us for the second time. Professor Daisy, you know, I have a lot of questions actually on my mind about life in Canada, and how do you, find it different from life here in Egypt? You've been here for 3 years or so, so you must have, found a lot of differences. So let's start by asking you about how is life different, from Canada here?
Well, my family can't understand why I'm still here. I think one major thing I see is that I like in Egypt and that is different in Canada is that here the families are much closer and tighter. Some might say too tight, where you can't breathe because the family has to decide everything for you. But in North American society, we go to where the job is. So there's no question. My son currently lives 2,000 kilometers from his twin sister, because that's where the job is. And we don't think twice about family dividing to get jobs, and therefore we lose that closeness. And we expect our kids to be, for example, independent by the time they are 18. By the time they hit university, we expect them to make decisions on their own.
But I guess you could be living quite apart from each other, but still be united, don't you think so?
Well, yeah, there's Skype, there's all sorts of online, there's Facebook, etc., but it's not the same as seeing someone once a week or having dinner, Sunday dinner or Saturday dinner with family and friends.
Do you care a lot about the social occasions?
It depends on your culture. So some cultures, Italian culture, Ukrainian culture, for example, there are certain events social events or religious events that you are expected to be with family. And so, but for others, it's like your Christmas, your Thanksgiving, those kinds of July the 1st, you might go and meet. Whenever you have holidays, you tend to gather with friends and family whenever you have days off work.
Yeah. What about, tell me about how people in Canada spend their time. Where do they usually go? And I'd like also to ask you about the Canadian cinema in comparison to the American cinema.
Well, the Canadian cinema, I'll start with that first, is we've got, again, because we're a smaller country, so the money spent on Canadian cinema is less, and it has to be sponsored by the government. Usually the government has some sort of input into it. What I like about some of the media, because Canada is a small country, we would get overwhelmed by American music, American everything. So there is a law that says that every radio station must play at least 30% Canadian music.
Really?
So to make sure that Canadian artists, so Justin Bieber gets played all the time because he's one of our few major successes, Avril Lavigne, but the radio stations have to play 30% Canadian. And so the government tries to support the Canadian culture that way.
When you go to the movies, to the cinema, do you choose a Canadian movie or a US movie or it depends on the movie itself?
It's probably I see more American movies than I do Canadian. Canadian, there's been a few, but if they're sponsored by the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, then you think of them as more historical, intellectual, educational.
Yeah.
You don't think of them as the James Bond type of movie, right?
Yeah.
But it's a niche for the educated. They will search for those movies and watch those.
Yeah. What about my first question?
So what's a typical Canadian do? We work a lot. Which is probably, we have very little time for recreation. First of all, the commute is like in Cairo. So for example, you would commute to work. It's too expensive to live in a place like Toronto, Cairo, so you live on the outskirts. So you might drive an hour, hour and a half to get to work, and an hour, hour and a half to get back to work. And depending, if you're a young professional, you're expected to...
Jobs there, are they the normal 9 to 5?
Oh, nothing is... If you're a professional, you're not working 9 to 5.
Yeah.
If you are an assistant or work, you know, in a clerical or reception position, you'd work 9 to 5. But it is normal for them to expect you to work 2-3 hours extra. So my daughter is a marketing manager, so she's at work by 9. She rarely leaves before 7, sometimes 8 o'clock. However, the work provides her with a gym. There's a gym at work, there's a cafeteria at work. They subsidize childcare, they subsidize a trainer. So they want to keep their workforce happy. But if you want to get ahead, you have to put in more than 8 hours a day. It's just expected of you.
Yeah. You know, one of my passions is to listen to the Canadian radio CBC. It's a very well-known, you know, radio network, I guess. Sometimes I like to listen to the Canadian music. I like it a lot. And I also like to listen to the news. You know, this radio is wonderful because it broadcasts a variety of stuff. So you feel like you're living in Canada when you listen to this radio. So do you often listen to this radio? I
usually listen to CBC radio because they have interviews, and if you're tired of listening to Justin Bieber, Avril Lavigne, and so every radio station seems to have the same. CBC Radio will have...
You know the Vinyl Cafe?
The Vinyl Cafe, I actually saw him live, where he reads stories, and he's so fascinating. And for every one of his performances, he would always bring in 1 or 2 musicians that are just starting out to popularize
Vinyl Cafe is a stand-up comedy program.
Well, and he tells stories, just everyday stories, in such a way that when you're driving, all you can do is to listen to him, and it's just a story, but the way he takes it in this, like he's talking to your neighbor.
He's called John?
Vinyl Cafe by...
John. Well, but he recently died.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, unfortunate.
Yeah, and but all the other programs that they have they're interesting because they interview musicians and talk about their history. So you learn a lot, and it's very different than any other radio station that I would listen to.
Yeah. Okay, let's now listen to a Canadian song, and we'll be back. So we're back, and I still have my Canadian guest, Ms. or Professor Daisy Fedyna. Hello, Professor Daisy, once again. Well, actually, as I was telling you, I'm a fan of the Canadian radio, and I like the music, the Canadian music very much. Well, especially the popular music. Sometimes on the radio, I hear a lot about road accidents in Canada. Why is that?
Well, it all depends on the time of year. If it's, we do have cold, a lot more cold than you have, and so beginning around...
Am I right? There are a lot of road accidents.
There are a lot of road accidents. Especially in the winter months, because people are not used to They forget how to drive in snow. So, for example, I was driving to work and it's asphalt, and then just a little bit of rain falls and it freezes. And so it looks like a regular road, but we call that black ice. So I spun 360 degrees. I just spun the car around. Winter time is particularly difficult, and that lasts 3 months. So, and any holiday season, there's always accidents because people speed. You know, regularly you can drive 140, 150, 160 kilometers.
Do you drive in Canada?
I always drive in Canada. I get it out of my system, and then I come back here and take taxis.
Ever get a ticket?
Yes. I remember trying to outrace the police officer because he was on the other side of a divider. You know, I was in the major lanes and he was in the collectors, and I thought he can't catch me, and I floored it, but I forgot that I had to go to work and I would have to cross over into his lanes. But usually you just apologize and say
sweet talk.
Sweet talk, you know. He didn't give me a ticket because it was my birthday. But and the other, you know,
So it helps to be or to show much respect.
Oh, of course. You're very. I'm so sorry, officer. And then the minute you see him leave, you floor it again.
Yeah, that's really fun. Okay. Of course, the traffic here is horrible.
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah. Yeah. You can never drive here.
You know, I think in Sheikh or places like that I could. I think there are two reasons I couldn't drive here. One, I love cars.
Yeah.
If my car got dented or scratched, I would cry. You know, I love cars, so that would bother me. And also,
it bothers everybody.
Well, then you have to watch from all sides, not just from who's on each side. There are no rules. Someone compared driving in Cairo.
It's hard for your car to be dented in Canada.
Yes.
Know, to be dented is to be hit, and you know.
Well, there are 3 lanes, and there is a car in each lane, and not 5 cars in 3 lanes.
And people respect the traffic rules.
Absolutely, they do.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me about the nightlife there in Canada. How's it like?
Well, it depends on your age group, right?
Age group.
Yeah, it depends what you consider nightlife. So obviously everyone heads to the big cities, and that's where you can find any kind of music, any kind of cafe, or don't want to say bar, but you know, an establishment. And usually they go up Friday, Saturday night is the party nights.
Yeah. You've met with people from, I guess, different communities in Canada. Do you find it difficult sometimes to deal with certain communities?
You mean in terms of ethnic communities, or depending on which province or district they're from?
Whatever.
I think you just have to understand. When I worked I worked for Catholic School Board. I was a vice principal there, and an Arabic family registered their children in our school, and you would say, why would they do that? They felt that our schools were more disciplined because the students were in uniform. But we were tolerant, so you make it, you know, Fridays we excuse the student to go to the mosque. You know, you just roll with it. So it all depends on your attitude whether you make things difficult or not.
Do Canadians care a lot about education?
Absolutely. I think a lot of them care about education because, you know, most of our education is public education. Our public schools are very good, so very few people send their students to a private school because it is very high standard. Other people care about education because it's a major part of the budget. So perhaps it is equivalent to what you might spend on military budget, but because we're defended by the U.S., we spend our money on education, I think, more than worried about, you know, security, like building a big army.
Yeah. What does it mean when the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge visit Canada? What does it mean to you as a Canadian citizen?
For me, almost nothing. You know, I mean, the royal family. I've been a rebel since I was in high school, so I remember.
A rebel.
I resented having to sing "God Save Our Gracious Queen" until we became independent from Britain in 1967. So I just. You know, for me, it's interesting. It's part of our English background heritage. We got our laws from England, etc. But it's like any, you know, the president of France coming or whatever. It's interesting. It's nice. They're a very pretty couple, and they match our prime minister.
Is this the attitude of all the Canadians?
I think most Canadians will say it's interesting.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, and it's nice, and they are a nice couple. But, you know, would I drive to Ottawa 5 hours to see them? No.
5 hours from Ontario to Ottawa?
Toronto to Ottawa.
Trip.
Yeah, well, it's pleasant if you turn on the CBC.
Yeah. Right, you are. All right, let's watch this event, and we'll be. So that was a small coverage of the visit of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge to Canada, and it seems that a lot of, or some Canadians are interested in it, you know.
Well, if you live in Ottawa, you will go. I'll watch it on television, thank you.
Yeah, this is really great. I'd like to talk to you about the fact that, let's talk some language now.
Sure.
All right. Canada is, you know, connected to both Britain and the US. Usually, talking about the language, let us say in writing, Canada follows the rules of British English. In spoken English, Canada is closely related to the US. Am I right?
I think we have more American expressions now. Because we have American U.S.
I mean, sometimes it's hard to let us say to distinguish or to tell the difference between American English and Canadian English. Sometimes.
Yes, I think mostly it's an accent. But depends which part of the U.S. you're from, how you speak. But we watch U.S. TV shows, movies, etc. We don't watch very much
in
British.
writing, you follow the British codes.
And sometimes the new dictionaries will give you, for example, the spelling of color, C-O-L-O-R or C-O-L-O-U-R.
Canadian?
The Canadians will go O-U-R like the British. But because we use Microsoft Office, it will give you both options, right? Or they will try and correct it for you.
Like so, when you write, you follow the British, you know, way of writing.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So we have the word, for example, color. It's C-O-L-O-U-R. This is the British way.
Yes.
All right. But in spoken, you know, Canadian. You speak like the Americans usually. So say color, you don't say color. For example, the same word.
Yeah, the accent is different. Yes.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I just wanted to comment on this because I know this as a fact. But generally speaking, you speak like you use the same expressions in the daily life language like the U.S., right?
Pretty much, yes. In fact, I was using the IELTS books, which are for English from Britain, and many of the expressions were different.
Tell us some unique Canadian expression.
Oh.
I mean, something that perhaps will be hard for us here to know the meaning of.
Well, I told you that I would be at the hotel, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And you said, where did that come from? And I said, it's an expression because
bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yeah. Right, and I just said it without thinking that it might be a difficult expression for you.
Well, I got it. I got the meaning, but I didn't, know it was Canadian. I didn't know it's a fixed expression that you use.
Well, you just use it when you're making fun, I guess. But it's a deer, and the deer is in both the States and Canada, but it's got
deer.
Deer, the animal?
D-E-E-R.
Yes, deer, not D-E-A-R.
Yeah.
All right, so, and it has a bushy tail, and so when your eyes are open and you're eager, then we say you're bush-eyed,
Yeah.
So,
could you tell us another one?
Well, they make fun of Canadians because we always end our expressions with A. So you're coming to the party, eh? E-H. And it's not really an expression, but the minute you say it, everyone knows you're from Canada.
Mm-hmm.
You do, and the comedians make fun of Canadians all the time because of that.
Yeah. But the Canadians are to the north of the U.S. Usually the people who are mocked, generally speaking, are the people who live in the south.
Well, yes, because they always make, you have to make fun of somebody.
What about you? Do you make fun of any American habit or way of talking about something?
Well, we always think that that the Americans know very little about Canada, so we tell them we all live in snow houses and it's always cold and we live like
they know little about Canada.
Very little. In fact, some TV programs will actually go and ask people, so who's the Prime Minister, and then they'll say ridiculous things and nobody knows. Whereas I remember in school I had to learn all of the American states, all the capitals, all the presidents, because it was part of our study of history. But in the U.S. they don't study Canadian geography or history. Like, at least at that time they didn't. So, but we in Canada and
you care more about education than in the U.S.
I wouldn't say that. I would just say that we look at more. Well, we looked at a lot of American history in our Canadian schools, and so we came out knowing much more American geography and history than even in our own.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add to this interview before we wrap up the episode?
Well, because it's an English program, I think one of the things that I use to teach is music. Because many of the people here listen to American music, but they've never looked at the words. And so it is a nice way to teach language if you teach them to sing along. I'm trying to learn Arabic.
Like karaoke way?
Oh, no. Well, we do some karaoke, but for example, I'm trying to learn Arabic, and so I have found some songs in Arabic, Marwan Khoury, Anwar Diab, or that repeat words. And so, and for me, that helps you make the sounds. Like there's one, Ma Balash, I love it. And and so he repeats certain sections, and so I would suggest
you learn faster.
You learn faster, and you're not afraid to make the sounds because you want to sound exactly like the singer.
Okay. Time flew.
Yes, it did.
I'd like to welcome you so much, Professor Daisy Fedyna. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Thank you for being with us on the show.
Anytime.
So, we've come to the end of this episode. I hope you've had fun with us. I hope you've understood at least the gist or the general meaning of what we're talking about. If your English is still, a little bit little. Well, actually, I want you all to take Professor Daisy's advice. Try to listen to songs, try to listen to music with the words, with the lyrics of the songs. That will teach you the correct way of pronunciation, and also